I don't walk away from challenges. It's just about how you manage the people that you're dealing with. I just treat people all the same.
How did you go about learning to be someone who could be in charge?
I don't know that I actually ever studied to be in charge. I actually probably threw myself into positions that were probably outside of what I thought was my capability.
Choosing to be a CEO is a lifestyle choice because your life really is consumed in lots of ways by what you do. Welcome back to the CEO Advantage podcast. We're really pleased to have you here, and we're really pleased, Millie, to have Carmel Crouch as our guest today. And I'm really pleased to have you here. Millie is our co-host. Millie, the theme that we seem to have coming up in our episodes has been around family businesses and a different kind of CEO. Today we're going to be talking with Carmel, who's a different one again. She's not the founder, but she's a long-term CEO and business leader and is now looking to transition out of the organisation. And we heard a little bit from Chloe in our previous episode about how for family-led organisations, that succession planning is really challenging. So I think we'll hear a little bit about that again today. Carmel Crouch, I'm really pleased to have you here on our CEO Advantage podcast. For our listeners, Carmel Crouch is the Managing Director of Steps Australia. Steps is an incredible organisation, originally founded in Queensland 37 years ago by families who were not satisfied that their children and young people were getting who experiencing intellectual disability, were getting the kind of services that their families wanted. Steps very much has grown to deliver those services and more for families. Welcome, Carmel.
Welcome, Carmel.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Carmel, I ask every one of our guests to start with, what was the first job they got paid for? What was the first job you got paid for?
Well, the first job I got paid for was working for Coles in the supermarket. I was 15 years old. I had left school prematurely because, I was a bit sick of being there, to be perfectly frank. So, life wasn't great for me at school. So I decided I was leaving, and it was a Catholic school, so I was taught by nuns. And I think my father gave me a week to find a job. In that week, I found 3 jobs, and I kept the one I thought was the one that was going to work for me best, which had people in it. And I think my first paycheck was about £11 and 37 shillings at the time. So you know how old I am.
Was that for you as a 15-year-old? I can remember the first time my first job paid $1.20 an hour, but I remember getting my little manila envelope with the notes folded up inside it, and it had a 20 in there and a 10 and a 5. And I as a 15-year-old, I'd never had a $20 note of my own, and I just thought I was loaded. As a 15-year-old, did you feel with your £11? Did you feel rich?
I did actually, and like you, I still remember that envelope. It was brown and a little long square one, a little long one with an envelope top on it.
Yep.
I opened it up and found the money inside. It was really exciting, and I recall spending half of it on my mother.
Interesting.
That's beautiful of you.
Carmel, one of the things that we'd like to cover today, Millie, our co-host, is an extraordinary young woman. She ran businesses as a young person and started with Yes. And you and I have had lots of conversations about building a career as a young woman. Tell us, and it's been a spectacularly successful career with what you've done, particularly now with Steps recently. But I'm fascinated to hear about your career journey, particularly leaving school. What were the career aspirations for young women who wanted to be leaders when you left school?
There weren't any at all.
Wow.
Certainly young women, when I left school at 15, were not expected to actually have a career. In actual fact, I recall a conversation with my father that said, no, you don't need to go to university or any of those other things. There's no reason for you to go to college. You just need to get a job, get married and have children. So they were the expectations of for young women in my era. And to be perfectly frank, it was never something that I considered was my path. Did I actually ever consider my path at 15? I don't think so. I think that I wanted to get a job because I wanted the freedom of being able to choose my own way of living, really, I think.
Were you always an independent-minded young woman?
Yes, my mother would tell you that if she was still around, that I was way too independent, which was my problem really in life, because I wanted more than I was really entitled to as a young woman.
And what about your friends around you? Were you one of the only females in your group that was quite driven on going to university and having a career?
No. I was, so I was, and still am, a relatively solitary person, I suppose. And I probably recognise now that I was the outsider in the school I was in. I was in a Catholic school, a Catholic high school. I wasn't typical of most of the girls who were actually in school at the time, and I wanted more freedom. I wasn't, I was a very good girl because I was a Catholic girl. However, I definitely was a sideliner. I wasn't as devout as the rest of the people that were part of the school, and it was a very tiny school as well. There was only 12 girls in the class that I was in.
And what did you study? What was your first study?
Well, when I went to school, of course, we only went to year 10 to start with. So I got to 3 parts of the way through year 10 and decided I wasn't going to finish. So, which is when I decided to leave school. And I recall the nuns coming down to see my parents and asking them why they were letting me leave school. And as I said, my father said as long as I got a job in the first week, that I could actually keep working, and if I didn't, I had to go back to school. And I recall the nun that was there with them talking to me and asking me, what I really wanted to do when I grew up. And I think I answered with, I wanted to be in charge. And she said, "What do you mean you want to be in charge?" And I said, "Well, I don't like people telling me what to do, so I have to be in charge. That way, I can actually make the decisions for my life that I want to make."
So you're one of those people. In our previous episodes, I've asked CEs how early they knew that they wanted to be in charge, and some of them who founded organisations would say, "I really never intended to be in charge," and became accidental leaders. You're definitely not one of those people.
No.
From an early age, you wanted to be in charge.
Yes. Yeah, I did. I actually thought that if I was in charge, I could actually control my life. And prior to that, I didn't have any control over it.
Interesting. And so in terms of study, you're leaving halfway through year 10, finding a job. You and I first met on a study tour in the US, I think our first one was.
Yes, what?
And so studying in that capacity was meeting people who were doing things that were innovative and interesting. Before you went on any study tours, how did you go about learning to be someone who could be in charge?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know that I actually ever studied to be in charge. I actually probably threw myself into positions that were probably outside of what I thought was my capability, and somebody else didn't think what somebody else thought was within my capability. I think that, the job I had with Coles finished when I was actually getting married, and the expectation was when I went to say goodbye, I was going on holidays for 3 weeks. There was a big goodbye sign and happy marriage. When I walked in, I didn't realise I was leaving. So when the manager actually said, because in those days as a female, you couldn't be the manager of a Coles store. You could only be an assistant manager because you were a female. So, life was never going to be one where you could actually be a manager if you were a female regardless in those days. And so when I saw that I was supposed to be leaving, I just said, fine, yeah, that's okay. I'll just go and get a job somewhere else. And I did. And I think I was managing, after that I actually got a job with another supermarket chain that had come into New South Wales called Tom the Cheap. And he was actually employing women who were assistant managers for Coles and Woolworths and those chains because they generally were the people who did the job. And I think by the time I was 22, I was managing I was managing 4 supermarkets and 300 staff. So
wow, 22.
So I think that I pushed myself into places to learn what I needed to learn. And I've always been really good with people. Managing people came relatively easy to me, to be honest.
Yeah, and probably a big passion. Is that when you? So one of my questions was what was your first big passion? And so I suppose manage people from then managing, looking after people.
Yes, it's actually for me. It's always been about the people, whether the people were the staff or whether the people were the people we were actually providing services to. It is always about the people for me.
As a 22-year-old woman working across 4 supermarkets, I would imagine lots of the people that reported to you might have even been older than you.
Yes,
and
substantially.
Some of them might have been men. So talk about throwing yourself in the deep end at a young age. How did that all work out for you?
I think it worked, and this might sound rather interesting, but I think it worked out because it never occurred to me that I could not do what I needed to do, and it never occurred to me very much that that somebody might dislike what I was doing either. So I was often confronted when an older man, and one particularly comes to mind, who was an assistant manager in one of the stores and then ended up with a 22-year-old as the manager across his store. So he didn't take that well, and tried a lot of nasty tactics at the time to get rid of me, but it probably didn't work all that wonderfully well. And to be honest, I turned him around probably in 6 months, and he was quite happy to work with me after that. It's a challenge, you see. I don't walk away from challenges, and I think if somebody's worth saving, then I'll actually put the time and effort into showing them that they can be a good part of the organisation if they actually have the right attitudes.
And that's endured in your leadership, hasn't it? The idea of developing people and giving them an extra go, but also assuming good in people as you've gone. So you're 22, managing 3 supermarkets and all of these staff. Where'd you go next?
Well, I had gotten married during that period of time, and my husband was a policeman, and he was transferred to a place in a border town in New South Wales called Finley, and we moved down there. I at that stage had one little boy and had adopted another with a disability who has probably been the reasons for why I'm involved in STEPS and in the disability sector. I got a job down there in the Ford dealership, and by the time I'd finished working down there, I'd probably restructured the whole Ford dealership.
Wow.
By the time I was 24 or 25. And then eventually we moved to a property that belonged to my ex-husband's family that was a sheep and wheat farm in midwestern New South Wales. And he was a great worker, and he did all the work, and I managed the property. So that's kind of how it worked.
Wow. And then when did you get into, so after the farm, and then there was?
We were there for about 15 years, and then we moved to the Sunshine Coast. bought a business. So we bought a food distribution business up here, and I think we had that for about, I don't know, probably another 10 or 15 years. My sister and I actually ran that business, and eventually we sold it to another food distribution company called Belly Ma that ended up being taken over by Bidvest, which of course is a big South African company. And I was contracted to stay on as the general manager running the Sunshine Coast.
And so you've been entrepreneurial from that point on. You've got involved in all sorts of different entrepreneurial ventures, including business broking, etc. Tell us about some of your entrepreneurial endeavours.
Well, I guess even working with Bidvest was interesting because we did a whole lot of in the business that we had that my family had. We were really unusual in the sort of deliveries and the sort of work we did with our clients, and so the business built fairly quickly. Being taken over by a corporate like Bidvest was interesting, and getting as the only female manager in Australasia with South African men running the business was really, really quite difficult for me on many levels. But I stayed there for 10 years as well. But in terms of being entrepreneurial, I suppose my entrepreneurial streak was when I actually left and started my own business brokerage and which I had for about 7 years here on the Sunshine Coast, which was very successful. And I think the reason that I actually sold it was because every business that I actually sold for somebody and to somebody, I ended up being a business coach or a business mentor for them. So I enjoyed that more than I did selling businesses. So I sold the business and kept the business consultancy, which I had for a number of years.
Mm.
I don't know how entrepreneurial that is, but it was but it was what happened.
How many women on the Sunshine Coast ran business broking businesses?
None. They're a very male-dominated industry. Not so much now, I suppose, with real estate agents, but business brokerage, there wasn't any. And we were very different business brokerage. It was because I was a female, I guess there was a lot of women who wanted to come and work for me, and so we ended up being by default probably a female dominated, if you like. I certainly had males working for us. There was a lot of men who came in and worked for us, but we were predominantly female and very different to the other brokerages in town at the time.
What were some of the communication strategies that you felt like you really had to fight for being a woman? And you were talking about the difficult time you had with the South African men, and were there some strategies that you had put in place that worked for you and that you would then teach your other female employees who you would later train with your new business?
I've been asked this question before about whether or not, and I guess that's a question about discrimination as to whether I ever felt discriminated against by the men that I worked with. It never actually occurred to me that I was actually being discriminated against. It was just one of those things that I had to deal with. And on other interviews that I've done, people have asked me about this. It just is one more challenge, I think. And I never saw myself I just see myself as a people. Mm-hmm. It's not about whether I'm a woman or I'm not. It's just about how you manage the people that you're dealing with. And did I actually have any specific strategies? No, I just treat people all the same, whether they're male or female, with respect and care and consideration. And in general, I've always been treated in the same fashion, mostly.
You've got a fairly no-nonsense approach, though, when when you know what needs to be achieved and what work needs to be done. You've got a fairly no-nonsense approach. How has your leadership style evolved over time?
I think I've said this before, but I will say that I probably have had a no nonsense approach, which means that I will tell people what I'm thinking, and how I believe something should or shouldn't be done. Hopefully, I do it with care and consideration. Doesn't always. Maybe it's not always. Maybe it's not always taken the way it's meant to be delivered. But yeah, you're right. I do actually have a no nonsense approach. I think the older I've got, the more open I am to actually saying how I feel about things. I think there's some joy in getting older where where you don't feel that it's necessary so much to pussyfoot around, for the want of a better word, how somebody might be feeling when there's a crisis in place that you need to deal with. But I guess I'm a pretty simple person, and I'm not highly educated under any circumstances. I don't have any qualifications that lots of other people have. I haven't ever I've never actually done a degree. I've never spent any time in university, and what I've actually learned through doing and being part of organisations where people have been involved. So I've had to teach myself what I needed to learn, and what I do is read a lot and listen a lot to people who I admire.
Carmel, one of the common themes in all of the conversations Millie and I have had with CEs is that they throw themselves into challenges. They do what we call start with yes, and you're a massive proponent of starting with yes, or seeing challenges as well. Let's go for that. Particularly if you're told that you can't, shouldn't, wouldn't, or won't. Can you give us some examples of where you've been told you can't do something and then delivered? Because one of the things I know about you is you don't gloat about it. You just move on. You're not doing it to prove it to them. You're doing it for a purpose. But can you give some examples of where people have said, "Oh, you won't be able to do that," or "You can't do that," and you've just gone and done it?
Yeah, well, I'd probably say that that steps has probably been one of the circumstances with that. So, when I sold my brokerage business, I was actually going home to work and have a nice life, doing some travelling, and then working with my business consultancy. So that was going to work really very nicely for me. And then as the chair of the organisation, I discovered that the organisation had some financial difficulties and needed to have somebody sitting at the head for a short period of time, I thought. So the board asked me if I'd step into that role, and I did, which was supposed to be for 6 months. And here we are, sort of 15 years later, I'm still here, and looking for somebody to take over from me. So it has been a difficult ride. But the answer to that question was that we brought in some forensic accountants to the organisation so that the board could see what the actual situation was. And probably the worst thing they did was to come into the board meeting and tell us that we needed to actually have the organisation find a merge partner, because the organisation could not get through, the challenges it was facing. And unfortunately, I had a really fabulous board, and still do, I might add. They're an amazing bunch of people who when I said, gosh, this is not something I'd be prepared to take account of from the accountants who told us that we needed to close it down. I think we should give this a go. The organisation had been around for 25 years at that stage, and it was really important. We were a really important part of the Sunshine Coast community. And we didn't, as a board, we didn't want to see that go. So I guess telling me that that we couldn't do anything about this was something that we couldn't fix was something that spurred me on, really, to, yes, I do think we can, and let's have a go at it.
Yeah.
Challenges, and that's not anything that I've ever shied away from.
When did you become the chair of Steps?
I became the chair of Steps a year after it was actually incorporated. So I think we had a very small site in Maroochydore, and I think they'd been working for about 12 months or 18 months when they won a substantial amount of money in those days. I think it was a couple of $100,000 or $300,000 to actually put employment program, program in place. And my son was 15 years old and had been invited to leave school because he has a disability, and I was looking for an organisation to support him in moving forward into a job. So I recall going in, and I was invited by Matthew's support worker at the time to actually come to a board meeting. And when I actually, by the time I went into that board meeting and came out, I came out the chair. Now, I had no idea how that quite happened, but it did. And so I've been the chair of the organisation ever since.
Yeah. So although sometimes you're mistakenly referred to as the founder of STEPS, but you were not the founder of STEPS. There was a group of families that were the founders of STEPS, but you were the very early the chair, and you've been the chair and steward through lots of ups and downs and growth and shrinking and all of the adventures of STEPS. So it's understandable that people might think of you as the founder. You're certainly the longest serving person at STEPS. So for our listeners, can you describe what is STEPS as an organisation? What do you do?
When anybody asks me what we are, I always say we're a disability organisation. We work in the disability sector, and that actually means that we work with people who have barriers to living their lives successfully. So whether they actually have a diagnosed disability, whether they are somebody who's coming in, a humanitarian refugee, whether they are an Indigenous person trying to learn English and to fit into the society that they're living in, whether they are young people with disabilities, whether they just need to learn something that actually gives them the opportunity to live a better life, get a better job, and move on with their lives, then, that's what we do.
It's a national organisation.
We call ourselves a national organisation because we have a couple of contracts that actually work nationally. But we really do, most of our business is actually done in 3 states, which is Tasmania, the Northern Territory and all of Queensland.
Okay.
Like many really fantastic organisations, you don't just deliver services that are contracted by government. In fact, there are some people who may be listening from government departments who have very unkind terminology for not-for-profit organisations that only deliver government contracts, which I think is incredibly obtuse and rude, and we won't repeat what words they use. They couldn't possibly use that about STEPS because you do way more than deliver government contracts. And in particular, you do some incredible work in a part of the organisation called the Pathways College. Can you talk about what the Pathways College is very dear to your heart, and it's a really important part of the Sunshine Coast community. I would argue that it's a really important part of the Australian community, even if it doesn't exist there in all of those communities yet, but should do. Can you describe to our listeners, what does the STEPS Pathways College do? But in the first instance, why does it even exist?
Well, it exists because I have a son who's 52 years old who lives at home with me still, who has a disability. So I came to grips probably about, probably 15 or 16 years ago that trying to teach your own child at home who has a disability how to live independently is not possible. I'm a professional in working with people with disabilities, and as a parent, I didn't have a chance in the world of teaching my son how to live independently. I had more success getting my sister or one of his siblings to actually talk to him about what he might not like to do or consider how he could live his life more independently than I did if I was trying to say this to him. Wouldn't take it from me. I'm your mum and you do all of those things. It's your job to do the washing. It's your job to cook. It's your job to clean up because it's not mine. I'm the kid, no matter how old he got. That was his point of view. So I'm watching how he reacted to his siblings and certainly to my sister. It became pretty clear to me that it was going to be a whole lot easier to have young people taught how to live independently if they were actually being taught by people who weren't their family members. So this blessed board that I have actually allowed me to start the process of building a program that actually was a real life replication of a college, of real life, if you like. Mm-hmm. So we got the community to start helping us raise funds to build a boarding college here on the site. So we are very privileged to have a 3.5 hectare site here in Caloundra, which is a Queensland government land that is actually that we actually have here on lease. And they've allowed us to build this lovely property here that has accommodation for 24 students. And those students come in here to live with us. And, you know, they rent their property. They are trained by training support trainers from the time they wake up in the morning until the time they go to bed at night, and to live their lives independently. So we teach them every single solitary thing they need to know to live independently in the community.
That sounds amazing.
And it is an absolutely beautiful program. Mm-hmm. So this is our head office here in Caloundra. So, you know, we run the whole organisation from here. Our corporate services are here and on this site. So at any given day, we might have 70 students coming in and out of this property or around this property. 24 of those live here. The others are actually day program students that come here as well. So, you know, it's just the most beautiful place to work. And there isn't a staff member here. And we've got probably 80 staff here on site any day that aren't involved in one way or another with our students. We have a beautiful cafe that they actually learn how to the day students learn how to work in a cafe. We have a garden centre down the back where we've got probably 70 or more volunteers that actually come into that garden centre here on this site. But the college itself is the reason why STEPS actually exists. It is everything that we ever dreamed of being and doing, all wrapped up into one package that actually says STEPS and why STEPS exists. And every part of our organisation, from Cairns to Darwin to Tasmania, every staff member actually understands the why we do what we do and are connected. So they raise funds for the college. In Cairns, the students actually have teams meetings with our students. Cassie Stanley, our executive manager of education and training, has all of her students up there who are Indigenous, who are refugees, who are people who probably have never had very much to do with young people with disabilities. They write to one another. They have at least a teams meeting once every quarter where they talk to one another. It is just the most beautiful scenario, and every single staff member in this organisation understands the why STEPS does what it does.
That sounds absolutely beautiful. Is this something that was your vision? Like, I feel like this whole idea and this incredible place that's been created because you planted the seed and this vision that you would have, you wanted as soon as you started at STEPS, or do you think it's been more collaborative?
Yeah, yes, it is. So yes, I can actually say that I was the founder of STEPS Pathways College. It is actually something that came out of my head based on my own personal experiences. And I guess from my point of view, I'm very clear on the fact that a student that comes in the front door here and stays with us for 12 months or longer, when they leave here, they will actually be independent enough to live in the community very successfully. Doesn't mean they won't need some further supports. It just means that they won't need the amount of supports they would have had if they would have had to have had if they left home directly. And but what I do know, and what I've proven, what we've been able to prove, is that every parent of every one of the students who've gone through this program has independence of their own. which they would never have had if their children hadn't come into our college. So they get to have a life that they couldn't possibly have had without Pathways College. And they get to have the life I'll never have, which is that they get to be able to have children, sons and daughters, and children get to have mothers and fathers instead of carers. And that's, that for me is the biggest gift that I can give to the parents of these young people who come through. So we've had nearly 70, and at the end of this year we'll probably have another 14 of them that will graduate in December. So we'll have actually put sort of 80 or more students through the program who are now living successfully in the community, and that's really fabulous.
In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business. What an incredible thing to do to create an opportunity for 80 individuals and 80 families to have what you couldn't have for yourself.
It reminds me of one of my favourite quotes in business and entrepreneurship is don't hate, create. When something is you're so deeply passionate about it and just almost frustrated that there's no solution, it's like, I'm going to create it myself. And this is exactly what you've done. You've created the most ultimate dream scenario in place. Like I found myself getting a little bit emotional with the way that you described it. It's so beautiful. I would just love to check it out one day. It sounds
please
incredible.
do. You're most welcome. Yeah, and I will say it's the only business in my entire life of having my own businesses and creating businesses that is actually financially not sustainable. So we actually have to have a scenario here where we have everybody who believes in this program, because every single solitary staff member actually is a part of helping to fund that program.
And I think so I want to go back to talk about this, your board, your amazing board by the sounds of things.
Yes.
They were huge advocates for believing in your vision and saying, yes, let's go for it. Let's just, it sounds incredible. What would, for listeners who are CEOs right now thinking, I would just love to have a board like that, who would just believe in my ideas and visions. How do you create the ultimate board, and what type of members are in skills or traits are within your current board that just work so well?
So we have a lawyer, a very skilled lawyer on our board who's our secretary. She's actually very, very skilled in mediation law, and also teaches law at university. We had a doctor who's actually a specialist in mental health. We have an accountant, and it's quite a small board we have. And we have a business person that's been on our board for quite a long time who had her own business and worked in finance. So I think that the board we have here, and they're a long-term board as well. So I guess our circumstances are actually quite different to a lot of other not-for-profit organisations where we've got a long-term board. And during the period of time where the organisation was in some financial difficulties, which certainly isn't now, I can assure you it's a very strong, financially strong organisation on a growth trajectory that's almost scary. But we do what we do really well. But our board know our organisation really, really well. So they're probably the most informed board in the country. And they know what their job is to do as well. So, I think I guess I could probably say I've trained them really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that other managing directors or CEOs probably have the joy of being able to do that. It's a little differently. It's a little different from the usual scenario. And there would be a lot of people who would be very concerned about having a managing director be the chair of the organisation as well, and it's not something that is actually it's not looked upon favourably. However, my board holds the organisation very close, and because they are so well informed about everything that's going on, they feel very safe in that scenario as well. So, in terms of succession planning, I have a relatively nervous board, really, from being in a position that they've been in where they are so well informed that they now need to move on to the next phase.
So before we get into succession planning, and I do want to talk to you about that and how easy or not succession planning is, you've tried to step away from the executive leadership of Steps on probably 3 occasions before.
Yes.
And you've had different experiences. They've not all been bad experiences all the time. But it hasn't worked out long term. So what is it about, without going into particular details of each one's tenure, but none of your CEOs have I guess, successfully led the organisation in the same way and with the same success that you have. Why is it so hard to get a CEO in to run an organisation like Steps?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't still be here if I actually had the answer to that. I do think it's very difficult for a CEO to come in after somebody like me who's been in the organisation for such a long time. I'm very well aware of the fact that actually makes people rather nervous, or it actually makes them feel insecure, I suppose, about how that might work. I think it's a little bit like having taking a business over from somebody who's owned a business for a really long time. So it's quite difficult to do that. Everybody wants to change what's already there. People want to put their own stamp on it, and that's all reasonable as well. But when you've had an organisation that's been run by one person for such a long time, or from one board for such a long time, who's actually got a very specific way of doing things and a culture of the organisation that's really strong. I've got long-term staff here, so I've got my executive team. 2 of my executive team have been here for more than 15 years. One of them has been here for 24 years, and very valuable members of those staff. They really do know their stuff. So it's quite difficult, I think, for a CEO to come in with that length of tenure, both from the previous managing director and from existing staff. So. But if I find the answer to that fall, then I'll probably find the right CEO.
Would you have someone within the organisation who already knows the people? It sounds like the next CEO needs to, have this same equal amount of love for the people, right? Like you do. So some of the people who've already worked with Steps, would they have the potential to become the next CEO?
Yeah, well, we've sort of certainly been down that track, and the answer to that is that they either don't or don't want to step into it, and even that in itself is probably indicative of the fact that they've worked with me for such a long time and and actually know what it's like. So it's a challenging job. I'm certainly never going to sit here and say that running an organisation of this size isn't a challenge every day. And you do actually have to have your life wrapped up in it. I spend more time being the managing director of this organisation than I spend sleeping. I'm here to tell you. And every day has a challenge. And if you're not up for the challenge of being able to move from one thing to another quickly and come up with the solutions, then you're better off staying out of these sorts of roles. But we've got nearly 550 staff here, and 20 odd contracts, and in very different areas, from mental health to teaching English, and working with young people with disabilities. It's a very diverse organisation, and you've got to be able to be skilled in lots of areas. I always talk about I'm never the smartest person in the room. I'm here to tell you. I'd put much smarter people around the room than I am. And, because I was the smartest person in the room, this organisation probably wouldn't still be standing. But I think that if you always put good people around you, then you've got a good chance that the organisation will do well. But you've got to be a good leader to actually make sure that you can continue to make that happen.
Carmel, you touched on the hours that you put in, and that often that's the case with CEs. Sometimes we've heard from previous guests though that working 15 hours a day you can't be productive working 15 hours a day all the time. You'd be out of balance and all of these different things. But equally, I would suggest that choosing to be a CEO or managing director or a founder of an organisation is a lifestyle choice, because your life really is consumed in lots of ways by what you do. And it pulls in your family, and it pulls in your friends. Sometimes there's even a merging sometimes or a blurring of the lines between friends and work and all. But would you agree that, choosing a career like yours, as it's turned out, is as much as it's a vocation, it's also a lifestyle choice?
Oh, I agree. I think that if you aren't really committed to the cause of why you're actually working for an organisation like ours, then you shouldn't come and work for us at all. And it's a lifestyle choice. I will tell you any day of the week that I do spend 15 hours a day, sometimes longer, doing what I do, but I love every second of it. And I do it because it's in the best interests of the people, but it's in the best interest of the organisation. And this organisation is really, really important to our communities. And we don't just affect the people who work for us or the people who we serve. We affect the community around them, all their families and their relatives, and all of the the thousands and thousands of people who are connected to our organisation, and in the fingers that are actually touching all of those families that we serve. So it's a big job and it's a big responsibility. And if the person sitting at the head of this doesn't actually understand that, then we're going to be failing again to find the right CEO. So yes, it is. It's almost a vocation. I actually talk about this as a vocation.
Yeah.
For me anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You and I have had these conversations before where when you're interviewing for executive positions and you're recruiting executives into the organisation, and there are 5 senior roles on their resume, but all of them 2 years, 1 year, 9 months, 2 years, 6 months. And the recruiters, there's lots of articles you see in recruiter magazines saying, it's not a problem. People like to see variety. But you and I have talked about this. It's like, well, that's not the variety I want to see, because you can't, if in less than 7 years, I would contend that you haven't seen the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, and navigated the organisation through both. Steps at the moment faces a risk that many organisations would not think of as a risk, but you think because you're experienced and you've seen highs and lows, you're at risk of success.
Yes.
You're about to grow really quickly. And while many people get excited about that, and if you'd only been around in organisations for a couple of years, you'd be going, "Yay, isn't this going to be great?" But you've got the experience to go, "Whoa, success is a risk as well."
Yeah, it is, and I think it's more of a success than retraction of an organisation. So, I mean, we are financially stable enough to do either of those things in terms of grow or retract. However, the growth, the sudden growth of an organisation, which is the phase that we currently are in, is actually a bigger risk, because organisations like ours aren't over-resourced at any time. So having to pull in an extra 50 or 60 staff members in the first 2 or 3 months of that sudden growth is risky. We don't have the resources in place that are actually skilled enough to do that. So we put everybody under incredible pressure. And we have to invest a reasonable amount of money. And we were careful about the areas that we actually looked for the funding for, and we were very successful in getting the funding that winning a program that actually will be that we know really well. We've been doing for since 2001, so we certainly know what we're doing. But bringing in a lot of people and new people into the organisation is difficult. The culture, gets a shock. Suddenly, you've got a whole lot of different people in here that you're trying to integrate into the way we do things, and that's really important to do. And getting them settled really quickly is really important as well. So, but the pressure it puts on the management of the organisation is really substantial. And we need to be, and we put in place the protections around that to support our people. But it doesn't alter the fact that that the risk is still greater than anybody actually anticipates. And Paul's right. If you have a manager who has only stayed in a place for a couple of years at a time, then they've never really stayed long enough to see the ups and downs of the organisation, or they've run when the organisation's got into trouble, or there's been a problem, so they leave it. So you've got to have, I need to have somebody in here who actually has the sticking power or the staying power to actually be here through the highs and to be here through the lows as well. Because if you don't, then you don't actually have the respect of the staff.
So you talk about, one of the key points that you're looking for. You're looking for a strong leader. There's no doubt about that. But one that would particularly have a lot of experience in this stage of growth and working with businesses to really level up growth. Is that really important for you to make sure your CEO has that experience?
Yeah, I think if the person who comes in is actually a good leader, then they can learn how to do a lot of the things that we do in terms of the programs. But they need to have some skills in actually managing government contracts, because this particular company actually runs a lot of government contracts. But I think the most important part of somebody coming into the organisation, certainly following on from a person like me who's actually been here for so long. And like I started saying before, I know a little about a lot of things that go on here. And that's what's really important, I think, as well, is that whoever comes in here needs to have a broad range of understanding different ways of doing business, because the government contracts are different ways of doing business in every single one of them. And you have to be able to be versatile and be able to move from one thing to another without difficulty. Because at any time in any one given day, I'll have a challenge in every single one of those programs that actually has to be dealt with, and staff who actually have to be mentored through.
One of the things that you have mastered that very few people do, and really any successful organisation led by a long-term leader, you'll see, has mastered the ambidextrous challenge of being a strong manager and a strong leader, because those two things are not the same. And I would characterise strong management is shrinking the organisation to fit the capability of the organisation, so to fit its systems and processes, fit its personnel, fit its talent, and fit its management structure. Whereas a leader is all about stretching the organisation beyond its capability, and hoping the capability catches up to stretch its culture to be bold and brave and to tolerate mistakes and do all those sort of things. And they're often a battle between each other, your management and leadership. And the ambidextrous challenge is to be able to be good enough at both of them, and good enough as a thinker and as a leader to know which one of those is needed at any given time. And in your experience, Carmel, there's very few people who are there's some very, very good managers and there's some very, very good leaders, but it's rare to find your combination of both. Is it unrealistic for someone who's a founder of an organisation or the chair of an organisation, is it unrealistic to think that they could find such a rare combination of skills and therefore they should try and make a decision that biases one over the other? How realistic is it to expect they're going to find somebody as skillful as you?
Well, I think somebody told me a little while ago that I was probably looking for a unicorn. I hate to think that I'm a unicorn, and I know you're not. So, and I know you are actually a very similar leader and manager to what I am, Paul. So, I do think there are a group of people out there, but I also think people need to learn how to do this. It's not necessarily so. I mean, I didn't grow up to be this age and have this amount of experience. I didn't actually automatically, this didn't automatically happen. I actually lived a long time and had a lot of experience to get here. So, it's unreasonable to have an expectation that anybody's going to have the experience I have. You have to be my age to get that. And you have to have had the life that I've had to get it. So, and I guess you have to be the personality that says that you're prepared to actually put in the hard yards to get where you're going and to stay there. For me, no matter what I've done in any part of my life, I've been really passionate about it. If I'm not going to be passionate about it, I'm not going to stay. I'm not going to do it. And I haven't really changed careers very much through my life. There's just been a handful. I call them a handful of lives that I've lived. This one is probably the longest career that I've had, and quite clearly, it would have been a whole lot shorter than this. I could have found the right person to stay and run the organisation. Is it unrealistic? No. I'm starting to think that I don't think anybody should have ever compromised to get somebody into a job because you think it might just be good enough. I think it's about the individual and what they're prepared to actually learn and give. And like I said before, I think it's really important that somebody comes into the organisation, into a role like this, to follow on from any CEO, no matter who that is, that they are actually really committed to what the organisation does. They can be committed to the organisation after they learn what it to be part of it, but they have to believe that coming into an organisation like ours that does so much for so many people and has amazing staff, and be part of making sure that those staff continue to do the great job that they do is really, really, really important. And without that, they shouldn't actually apply for the job. That would be my view of the world.
Yeah.
Working in the space that you work in at Steps and that you've chosen to work in is, by its very nature, incredibly stressful, because you can see that there is this really high need, for example, with the Steps Pathways College, this great need and great skill to liberate families to live a different life than they otherwise would, but not the resources to deliver such an incredibly powerful and valuable service. And what we've seen with the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or NDIS, was a desire to properly fund those. But now what we're seeing is
the retraction of that to very questionable commercial viability levels for service providers. So it's, by its very nature, it's a stressful space to work in, because the need is so high and the resources are so short. And therefore, your ability as a leader to soak up stress or to sit in stress is quite remarkable. And one of the sad things about being a leader in that is to see how many people do get crushed by that pressure. It's an incredible amount of pressure. How have you managed to soak up so much stress and live in that tension for such a long period and still remain a positive, optimistic,
powerful person?
Well, the colour in my hair probably talks about the stress level that I'm under. So, that's probably one of those things. But look, I think I said before, I probably thrive on stress. And to be perfectly honest, if the organisation didn't have any challenges, I probably would have left a long time ago. It is something that I enjoy. I enjoy a challenge. I've always enjoyed a challenge. And like I said earlier, if you tell me that something I can't do, going to be the reasons why I do it. And there's plenty of people who tell me that I shouldn't still be doing this at my age. And I understand that lots of people have a point of view about age. I don't. I have a point of view that says you're only as old as you want to be, or you feel like you can do. And whatever I can actually commit, my time in life to actually making the lives of others. And I know that sounds pretty sappy, but at the end of the day, that's how I've lived my life, really, particularly during these last 36 or 7 years with Steps, is that I actually recognised fairly early on that I could make a difference. And if that's the only thing I leave when I leave this earth, then I'm probably going to be a pretty happy person. So it doesn't stress me out. Do I get tired? Yeah, I do get tired. Do I ever get tired of solving a problem? Never. I don't get tired of solving a problem. As long as it's in the best interests of the individuals and or the least amount of people get hurt in the process, then it's been a good day.
So, Carmel, let's say you find your dream CEO, the one who's going to be next. What does your life then look like?
Well, that is a really good question, Millie. It's a really good question. And I think when you've actually lived a life of service, that I probably have done, certainly over the last 36 years, it's pretty hard to not continue to be part of a life of service. And I will always be part of Steps in some way or another. Whatever I can do to assist, I will, but I won't stand in anybody's way either. So, that's it. What's really important is that, somebody coming in here is never going to have to, they're never going to have me in their way. But you kind of can't escape the fact that you've got, that you're coming in behind a person who's actually been in a job absolutely for the last 17 years that I've actually been working in the organisation. And you can't get away from the fact that it has been part and parcel of my life and my life with Steps, and it's hard to separate those two things. So for me, I've worked so long, I probably don't have all that many years to actually have to worry about what I'm going to do next. But hopefully still have some involvement and certainly help wherever I can, as long as that's not a hindrance of any sort to anybody who's in the role.
Yeah.
Yep.
Millie, I'm sure you'll agree, what a remarkable person, incredible story. Carmel, on the days where it hasn't gone perfectly at Steps, and I'm sure that rarely is the case that days don't go perfectly for you. But on those days when you're driving home, and if you're not that happy, and a song comes on the radio that no matter how hard you try to not smile, it makes you smile. What's the song?
Well, Paul, my song is Happy, and it actually plays on my iTunes every time. So it's actually my phone ringing thing, which is the one that's
Pharrell Williams.
Pharrell Williams, yeah. So it's the Happy. I can't hear that without actually smiling and brightening my day. So if I've had a really tough day, that's the song that's getting played on the way home. Perfect. And every time my phone rings, it makes me smile, no matter what's on the other end.
She's amazing,
Beautiful.
isn't it? Fantastic. Carmel, thank you so much for being part of the CEO Advantage podcast today. We've really loved having you. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmel.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Millie. It's a pleasure to meet you.
All the best for your next steps.
Yeah, thank you.